Hey, welcome back to the home front. I am your host, Reed Galen. Today, I am joined once again by the incredible, the inimitable, and the invincible Katie Phang. Katie, welcome back.
I feel like I need music, like dun 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 dun.
All right,
I
yes,
need some music.
we won't have funeral level pyrotechnics, but I will say that
Thank
we will
you.
have some neon and maybe some marching bands and an elephant or two.
So, Reed, is it unseemly for us to start our conversation today just briefly talking about what just transpired in Arizona?
Sure.
I mean, I don't want to be, rude, but I'll go there. I have. I just turned 50 this year, as I like to say, hit the fifth floor. And in my 50 years, I sadly and unfortunately have had to go to my share of memorial services and funerals, etc. Never went to one in an arena. And I don't begrudge if somebody has that level of sheer number of people that want to memorialize somebody, good for them. That being said, I've also, excuse me, but I've never been to one with pyrotechnics. That was a new one for me. Um, and I've never been to one where it was just a political rally. And as somebody also astutely observed, his parents weren't there, nor was his sister, which I also thought was very interesting. And I don't begrudge the way that people grieve. Perhaps they chose not to be a part of that, but it just seemed grotesque to me. That seemed to be the adjective I would use, grotesque.
Yeah, I got the sense too that Mrs. Kirk didn't quite expect literally the fireworks, to go off as she was standing on stage. So,
But there
you
was
know,
still something very performative and fake about the way she was that day too. I don't know. It just that even just the way she spoke didn't sit well with me either.
no, but again, I think that you saw that this was not a moment of solemn reflection or thoughtfulness. But remember that MAGA doesn't have that. And it also, I'd say that this was, like we'll see in upcoming CPAC conferences and other wackadoodle events. This was also, a test run for the likes of J.D. Vance and Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio, who have now, I assume, in their own heads, all determined themselves to be Donald Trump's heir apparent, probably because he's told them that. Maybe not Rubio, but they're all trying to be the next guy in line. These kinds of movements don't often do that easily, or what I would say in an unmessy kind of way, but that doesn't mean it won't continue when he's gone. It'll just be certainly different. But as we're talking about loathsome creatures, let's talk about somebody who you and I were texting about. There's this guy, everybody, who I'm sure you've seen. His name is Tom Homan, and he is the White House's designated immigration thug. He is bald headed. He is ruddy cheeked. He has a gin blossom to beat the band. I think there's probably not less than 900 empty bottles of Cutty Sark in his garage. And he was caught on tape last year taking a bag, guys, of $50,000 that could have been seen as a bribe had he actually done anything with it. I assume at this point, Katie, he has. The FBI chose not to indict or charge him, excuse me, in that moment. I think it was September of October of last year, because they were thinking, well, maybe Donald Trump gets elected. What happens then? There was also some talk maybe that they would try and make a better case against this guy. But let me lean on first your legal history and then your moral and political perspective on something like this.
Yeah, so here's the thing. I mean, Reed, I want to know where the money is. I'm frustrated that nobody has actually asked Tom Homan, because even though Laura Ingraham asked him your thoughts on this, and his answer wasn't a full-throated denial. It was whatever I did, it was not illegal or criminal, according, to the FBI and the DOJ, the Trump FBI and the Trump DOJ. How come nobody's asked him where's the cash? Like, where's the money? What did you do with the $50,000? Did you give the money back? Did you donate to charity? Did you put it in your pocket? Did you pay for like an addition to your pool? Like, what's happening? I also think they were smart to want to see what additional crimes he committed. So I want to make sure this is very clear from a legal standpoint. They could have charged him right then and there in September of 2024 with conspiracy to commit bribery. Bribery, in and of itself, as a standalone substantive offense, because he was not a public official at the time and Donald Trump was not in office, probably would not have been sustained. But conspiracy to commit bribery would, among some other federal statutes involving fraud. I don't have a problem with them waiting to see what further criming he would do once Trump made it back into the Oval Office. The fact that Kash Patel, Emil Bovey, Todd Blanche, and Pamela Jo Bondi are now suddenly the gold standard of legality as well as FBI investigation credibility and excellence just tells you that this was just dead on arrival when Trump took office again. The other thing I'm really harping on about Tom Homan, Reed, is Tom Homan made a lot of money in his private consulting business in between Trump term 1.0 and Trump term 2.0 on privatization of prisons and other detention facilities. So it kind of just makes sense that if a man is now in charge of billions of dollars as earmarked and given to ICE and DHS, courtesy of the big bullshit bill, somebody who's bribe worthy and has proven himself to do that, I think it's worth making sure that this guy stays clean and is a clean and good faith actor. I can only imagine the amount of money that's now made it to the Seychelles and the Cayman Islands in private accounts in other people's names or in some private entity's name that has to do with Tom Homan.
Well, so just on where the money is, it was $50,000 in cash, and as I learned by watching Ozark, it's very difficult to just deposit $50,000 in cash into your
You have
bank.
to launder it. Money
Right.
laundering,
So,
yes.
but he doesn't seem like the laundering type. So it wouldn't
No,
surprise me if he's just sort of got it in the closet. Right. He just sort of
under his
peels off a
mattress.
few $100 bills whenever he feels like it. Right.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
but like it's our money, right? It was tech. I mean, the FBI didn't just like, they got it from somewhere and then they gave it to him and now it's disappeared. But again, $50,000 in the
You
context
know
of
what,
billions of
Reed?
dollars of grift and graft
You're the
seems
first
small
person who's
potatoes.
just, I'm so sorry to interrupt. You're the first person who just reminded me. So, when we used to do, as a prosecutor, we used to do drug buys a lot with
Mhm.
undercover as well as confidential informants. We used marked bills because that's one way to prove the chain of custody. If I give you a bill that's marked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you as the confidential informant or the undercover detective, and then the criminal defendant ends up with the bill 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that came from us as prosecutors. Obviously, that was a result of that drug buy. And we used to do controlled buys in order to get search warrants to enter homes and places to be able to substantiate the probable cause that we'd be able to get into those locations. So you just raised a really good point because it just occurred to me now when you just said that, Reed. These had to have been marked bills. These had to have been bills because these were undercover FBI agents. This wasn't just like, hey, can we pool everybody's cash together, hit 50 grand, and then go and give this to Tom Homan? So I feel like it would have been an even easier way to be able to do this, to be able to track the money, knowing that these were marked bills, and marked denominations and tracked denominations, which just even underscores why it's such a bullshit that this investigation died the second that Donald Trump took office again. Sorry for that little wayward
No,
thing, but
no.
it just
So
occurred to
let
me when you said
me.
that.
No, not at all. And thank you because I don't know how any of that works other than again
Because
by
you're not a
watching shows.
criminal, Reed,
Well,
because you're not a criminal.
well, we're not criminals yet, but that doesn't mean we won't be soon, Katie. All right. So let me
Antifa.
ask you.
Antifa.
Let me, let me ask you though about that. So the one thing that we could, I will say, I won't put this on you. The one thing I will say is that it seemed to me that the Biden Justice Department did not do enough of the things it could have when it had the time to do them. And I put Holman in that category, which is yes, okay, in a normal world, maybe they would want to build a stronger case. But
Okay.
if they knew these FBI agents are not like these guys do not fall off the turnip truck, these guys and gals, right? They are very smart. They often have not only college degrees, but law degrees or whatever else. There must have been some knowledge on their part that if Trump did indeed win and this guy was going to be somewhere in the food chain, that they weren't going to be able to charge him. So why not charge him with what you could when you had him? Maybe, now look, I'm not saying this would happen, but maybe if he had been indicted last year before Trump took office, maybe he wouldn't be there now. It's not to say somebody else wouldn't be, but this just seemed to be a pattern of hesitation. When the time came to do things, they just said, we'll wait. We'll just wait.
No, and I appreciate that because I can actually ascribe to the two different schools of thought on this read. One is why not strike when the iron is hot? If you have probable cause to be able to arrest and prosecute and bring an indictment and return an indictment against Homan, why not? Knowing that you have that short window of time between November and January to be able to wrap up that. Um, but I will say this, and again, it kind of falls within that camp of perhaps there should not have been delay and maybe people were asleep at the switch. The level of destruction and chaos that has transpired in the last 8 months, I am not ashamed to admit I was screaming from the rooftops about Project 2025 and how bad this is going to be. But I will admit to all of you, with no shame, that I don't really think I appreciated how damn bad it was going to be in these last 8 months. I also think that FBI, the DOJ, there is a naivete, but I almost appreciate and respect that naivete that with the changing of the guard in administrations, especially in those agencies and in those departments, Reed, that there will be the nobility and the integrity to not compromise standards, rules, procedures, norms, and institutions in those particular spaces just because you have a new president. I know that they do purges with new administrations. That's nothing new, especially in the DOJ, the U.S. attorneys, et cetera. But we're talking about line prosecutors. We're talking about people that are in the trenches every day in these courtrooms, Reed. We're also talking about FBI agents, which normally you don't have turnover on FBI agents. You don't have a purge of FBI agents when you change administrations. Again, it's naivete, but something that I almost appreciate and respect, Reed, because I would not want my FBI and my DOJ to think that because somebody is coming into office in January that is a different president of a different political party, that it means that we need to rush across the finish line to be able to bring charges or to bring indictments. That being said, I'm probably talking out of both sides of my mouth because it was Donald Trump getting into office for Trump 2.0. And we know that he promised a retribution presidency, which I will take the corrections that I've been getting because, folks, I do read your comments and I do read your notes and I appreciate them. It is not a retribution presidency anymore. It's a revenge presidency. So I accept that amendment, that friendly amendment. I will take that from all of you. So knowing it was going to be a revenge presidency, Reed, yeah. But you know what? I think knowing it's a fait accompli now with a lot of these political prosecutions, I feel like we now have to focus our attention on educating Americans on why this truly is what I call a 5-alarm fire when you have that dumbass posting on Truth Social to Pamela Joe that she's doing a shitty job and he needs more loyalists in positions where they can bring criminal prosecutions against political enemies.
So I want to get to Kash Patel in a second, but I want to
Well,
stay
he's too
there.
busy in Valhalla, Reed, so I'm not quite sure if you can
Jeez.
reach him.
I know. I think the Thor and Odin are the door will be
Turning
blocked
over.
if he
Yeah.
gets there.
Yeah.
They'll throw a hammer at him. Metaphorically, of course,
Oh, yeah, we
supernaturally, of
got it.
course.
Yeah.
Yes. But let's talk about the Project 2025 stuff. I feel like there are a lot of us who, like you, we're trying to tell them, like, guys, this is what they've been doing. And as I've said before, and I'll say it again to you, Project 2025 can be boiled down like this. It is a system designed to gut the parts of government that help and protect Americans at the expense of the parts of government that control Americans. Period. Full stop. That's all it is. That's all it is. But that means it's everything. And I think that, it seemed to me that they got off to a very fast start in the Trump administration. Then they sort of slowed down like May and June and maybe even in July. And then when the Epstein stuff started bubbling up again, they just hit the accelerator. And then after Charlie Kirk's assassination, obviously they put nitro in the tank and they've just been taking off.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that this is, talking to somebody very close to me, they said, if we're 9 months into this, like, what's it going to be like a year from now? And I think that's the other part that I am unfortunately not surprised, right? And people are like, you do
Mm.
this all day, every day. How come you're not freaking out? I'm like, because I told you it was going to happen. That's why it says in my bio, your friendly neighborhood Cassandra, right? Like to be right, but never
Touche.
be believed,
Touche.
right?
Yeah.
And so here we are. And now the question is like, when, and like we have to look back at history a little bit. Practically speaking, Katie, most people are not going to go to the streets. They're not going to go to the barricades.
And why do you think
History,
that is, though, Reed? Why?
you know why? Because what is the prime mover of human nature? Self-preservation,
Hmm.
right?
So you think fear will overcome any sense of like of defending democracy or preserving democracy?
I think the issue with, and this is a great question. I'm glad you asked. The
No, I'm always
problem
wanting
with
to know.
hold on, my light turned off. I'm going to turn it back on. It turned off just as I started talking about democracy. How metaphorical. I think the problem with the idea of democracy, and this breaks my heart more than anybody's, is that for too many people for too long, it hasn't worked. So
Mm,
what do you mean democracy? I vote, right? My vote doesn't matter. If I vote or I don't vote, it doesn't change things. Now, you and I, in a very true believer status, believe that every vote does count, and I believe that too. The problem
same.
is that people are voting for something because they're told about it or because they believe in a party or a candidate, and what comes out the other side is broken promises, no action whatsoever. And as I've heard from a lot of my friends and, different activist groups, year in and year out, people look out the window and their lives don't change.
Mm,
And so at some point, that apathy,
mhm.
leads to non-participation, or it becomes antipathy and it leads to somebody like a Donald Trump, which is, it's when people say, oh, they're voting against their interests. No, they voted for their interests and nobody paid attention. So they said, if I can't have my interests, I'll take anger. And I don't know why this light keeps turning off, but I'm going to start let you talk so I can figure out what the heck's going on my end.
Well, for what it's worth, when the light isn't on, we can still see you though, Reed, so
Oh,
it's
thank
fine.
you.
So because you shine so bright, it's just your personality, Reed.
It's my
Here
forehead that shines.
no, Reed, so this is where I find myself. I am now resolved that we need to turn our despair into determination. I don't try to begrudge anybody having despair. I am very open and transparent here and on any, frankly, media platform about my frustration, my anger, my fear, my worries, my sadness, right? I
Right.
just shared yesterday on Substack, I've become more of an introvert lately than I usually am. I'm still, what you guys see is what you get. I really am like this all the time in terms of I wake up like this, etc. But I am a little bit more guarded because I do have a concern about not having a shared sense of morality with a number of people in my immediate community and surroundings. But turning despair into determination doesn't disregard the despair. It acknowledges it. It just takes it and converts it into something that is a call to action. I don't disagree with you that a lot of people probably won't come out on October 18th. But it doesn't stop me from reminding people, though, that their apathy is them not slow walking into this autocracy, right? It's like, let me take the fucking speeding bullet train into autocracy. And I don't also begrudge people and their level of engagement, though, at the same time, though, Reed. So
Hmm?
I have said this time and time again. You may not feel comfortable going out and protesting in the streets on October 18th. That's fine. But if you could also maybe convert some of that while you're hanging out watching The Summer I Turned Pretty, and you did maybe some postcards, or maybe you did some email chains, or you did something like that, that has value too. I don't have a problem with that at all. I do have a problem with people that don't do anything at all, Reed, and you know better than me because you have your finger on the pulse of this. I think that this is now turning a tide against the Republicans in a very palpable way. I think that we have not hit the bottom yet, which maybe is not good news. But I actually think, considering, and I don't love polls, but considering approval ratings for Trump right now, et cetera, I also think with the shutdown looming next week, there's a lot of stuff that people are paying attention to now more than they did before. Perhaps it's because they got burned. Perhaps they've had to sustain a loss that is perhaps insurmountable for them. But I do feel like they're feeling it. And I don't have any satisfaction in their loss or in the way that they're hurting right now. But if it makes you pay attention, good, because this is what you get, right? And so but I also am not trying to do and be converts. I'm not going to convert somebody. I know I'm not. I am just trying to educate people on why, these are bad things. Why having somebody taking a $50,000 bribe shouldn't be in charge of billions of dollars of money. common sense, right? Things like that, I
Yeah.
think, resonate. But I agree there is an apathy there, but I wouldn't underestimate people's desire for change still.
So, well, we are in a change era, and I think if there's one thing that our Democratic friends have not learned is that the status quo or more of the same is not going to get it done. But
Amen.
let me say this too: is that there was a survey out, I think it was NBC and NORC or maybe Wall Street Journal of Republican voters,
Yeah.
and they ran the initial survey in June, and they ran it again just the week after Charlie Kirk's assassination.
Mm.
And in that survey, the female respondents, Katie, went from 30% of the women in June thinking the country was headed in the wrong direction to 70% headed in the wrong direction. A total inversion in just 90 days.
Okay, wait,
And
say that again. 30% said wrong direction to 70% in right
Wrong.
direction?
No, no. So
In
let
wrong.
me let me make the
I'm
math
sorry.
easier. Let me back
Sorry.
in June, 70% of female respondents, Republicans, said the country was headed in the right direction. By
Right. Okay.
this month, 70% said it was headed in the wrong direction. A complete flip, right?
After
Which
the
is
Charlie Kirk
yeah.
assassination.
And then there were also a lot of people. There was a truck. They did a lot of verbatims, and there was a truck driver they interviewed. He said, "Costs are so expensive. Things are so expensive. It's getting harder and harder to live." And I'm wondering, to your point, and I'm going here with a campaign strategy piece of this, is whether or not something like the Charlie Kirk assassination was such a shattering event. It was actually a wake up call for a lot of people to say, "Wait a second, what is going on around me?" Right? Not because
Yeah.
and these people probably were Charlie Kirk fans, or at least they knew of him and appreciated him, whether or not they actually paid any actual attention to him. But to your point, we should not, if we want 2026 to be a watershed election, one, I don't want to hear anybody say, well, even if we have elections, like if you didn't really believe that we were going to have elections in 2026, like, would you just be making jokes about it or would you be doing something? Second, you have to assume that we're going to have elections, right? And act accordingly. So now let's talk about Republicans. If we know that Republicans are now down in the mouth, the opportunity is not to convert them. As you said, Katie, they're not going to convert. They're not going to say, yes, I'm a Republican. Now I'm going to vote for a Democrat. They're likely to say, just like a lot of Democrats have, I'm sick of all of you, right? I don't want anything to do with you. And I think that's also a key reason why, as we've seen all this other rigmarole, right? Like, what's her name? Crazy press lady going on Fox News, this talking about the
Caroline
escalator
Levitt.
at the UN, right?
Oh,
Because they know that they have to keep the insanity going one day, because Thomas Massey has now got the vote he needs to get a discharge petition
for
on
the
Epstein.
discharge
So,
petition.
guys, like we have to keep Epstein going, not because Republicans will convert to Democrats, but because we want them saying, we don't want to have anything to do with this either. They're going to stay home. Remember, in the 2016, 2020, and 2024 elections, the reason that the person elected president was elected was not because because a wave of Republicans and or Democrats turned out, but because the base voters stayed home. It happened to Hillary in 16, it happened to Trump in 20, it happened to Harris last year. And
True.
so, guys, we need to have a dual strategy. Guys, this is called campaigning, in which you are working to convince your voters that turning out is very, very important, which has to start now. And we'll start in places like Pennsylvania with Supreme Court races, New Jersey, Virginia, and other local races that are coming up in just a few weeks. Then, guys, we also have to say, let's push those Republicans further and further away from Republicans, not from Trump. This is a key point. I'm sorry to go on a rant.
No, I want to hear this.
Don't give them Trump to hide behind. Either the members of Congress, the politicians, or the voters. Say the Republicans are doing this. The Republicans are increasing your taxes. The Republicans are taking this away from you. The
The
Republicans are
GOP.
the GOP is hiding or is making up for a pedophile, right? Like make them not want anything to do with a party that frankly they don't like either. Right? A lot of these people are only there for Trump. Don't give them him to latch onto. Just go after the Republicans. This is all doable, but it seems like when I talk to people, Katie, it's like I've just asked them to figure out how to, create nuclear fission for the first time. Like this is nuts and bolts stuff.
Well, I'd say in defense of people, though, including myself, for a long time we did look at the political system as being very binary, I think, right? You either are of one party affiliation or the other. And for many of us, we grew up with a particular party affiliation in our
Right.
home. I grew up in a home of Republicans, and I put that in quotes because my late father and my mom, albeit party affiliated as Republicans, I stumped for Dole Kemp in college at Yale, of all places, right? I went to a quote liberal, university for college, but I stumped for Republicans. Listen, I stumped for Charlie Crist when he was his Republican iteration when he was running for governor here in Florida. I think it used to be very binary. I also believe people vote on vibes, Reed, right? So, yes, we maybe vote on a party and a party figure, but people vote on vibes. And I do feel like Democrats lost the plot when they thought that articulating a message that sounded clear and logical, right? To your point, it's in your best interests. Like, I don't really think that that fits the vibes energy, right? I
Right.
also think that you telling people smartly so that that's a dual prong strategy. It's let's reinforce our base with the core values that we know are always appealing. But also I think we cannot, because I said this yesterday and I'll say it again. Two of the biggest lessons from November 2024 for me. One, I think we have now um, retrenched ourselves in communities with coalition partners that truly are like minded. I think there was a flirtation with this quote, super big tent going on. And yet we really got to see who are our true allies and our true advocates, right? I feel like that has further kind of strengthened relationships that are true. And then number two, I think the authenticity of people has now become even more important. And we've learned that we cannot rely upon our bigger institutions like the DNC, the DCCC, et cetera, to come and save us. We have to save ourselves, which kind of, I think, lives in conjunction, Reed, with my first point, right? We have to be there for each other, which is why I don't underestimate the power of what we just saw happen with the Jimmy Kimmel thing. Maybe it is an organized, campaign with the power of the purse to be able to influence outcomes. Who the hell knows? But that was a very quick turnaround to get Jimmy Kimmel back on the air. I will say that if we can continue to underscore that authenticity for our base, we will be fine. And I do think, to your point, seeing what happened in 16, 20, and 24, I think people who maybe were apathetic about going to vote because they thought it was a shoe and win are now going to go and vote, right? But then we also have to have the infrastructure built because if we eliminate mail-in voting, et cetera, and we don't get that luxury anymore, which is not really a luxury if you think about it, it's what the fucking Republicans do, then we need to make sure we have the infrastructure to get those votes to count. We need to get our people to the polls. But then I also think you're right. I'm never going to convert somebody who's a MAGA Trumper. They're never going to look at me and listen to what I have to say. But somebody who is embarrassed by where the party has gone, because there is no party called MAGA. There is no fourth party called the MAGA party. It's the Republican Party. So, to your point, if they're embarrassed to be watching Donald Trump telling all those other countries at the UN that they're going to hell and stating the stupidity he's stating about Tylenol and autism and all the other stupidity that he does, guess what? You know what? I think you're right. I think people are going to be embarrassed to be Republicans, and maybe they'll do what we always secretly want them to do if they won't shun the party affiliation. They'll vote for the Democrat when they go into the polling booth.
Yeah, and again, even if they don't, I mean, I would say the most dyed-in-the-wool MAGA, and I was in Florida, your home state, a few weeks ago with a guy named Rich Logis who runs an organization called Leaving MAGA, and we had a discussion about that, which was he
Yeah.
thinks that some of the folks within the MAGA coalition will probably quiet quit because it's almost more a
Ah,
cultural movement than it is a political movement. To come out and say I'm done with this guy is to put yourself on the outs with friends, family, your work,
true.
whatever it
That's a good
is.
point.
And so,
Quiet quit. Okay.
yeah, just sit quietly, and nobody's going to know who you vote for if you. I mean, they'll know if you vote, but nobody's going to know who you vote for. To your point, if you go into the and once you go into the polling, into the voting booth. So I think that's another part of it. Okay, before I let you go, because I promised I'd only take 30 minutes of your time, give us something. Give us something interesting, something legalese. Give us all something that we can take into the rest of our week here.
So I'm very proud to announce I actually returned to cable news this morning, Reed. I did a hit on CNN, which was kind of funny because Sarah Sidner was the anchor and she was like, the Katie Phang from MSNBC. I'm like, yeah. Um, I'm actually, I do work as well, doing legal work and strategy on comms for Democracy Defenders Fund with Norm Eisen and others.
Mhm.
Abby Lowell, as you all probably know as well. We announced today that we sent a very strong letter to the Washington Post on behalf of our client, Karen Attia, who was wrongfully terminated from the Washington Post last week after she posted as an opinion writer some thoughts about the death of Charlie Kirk and some honest assessments about the state of America after Charlie Kirk died. I invite you to go and read. The New York Times broke the story, but I did appear on CNN to speak on behalf of my client, and I'm really proud, Reed, because this is the type of action we need to be taking. The court of public opinion is one thing, the court of law is the other, and we need to be fighting in both of those venues. And so I'm incredibly proud to represent Karen. She was the last Black female full time opinion writer at the Washington Post. And as I said on CNN this morning, when the Washington Post mimics what Donald Trump is doing in trying to silence opposition and opposing views, that's truly when democracy dies in darkness. So I'm incredibly happy to do that. I'm going to post the letter on social media so everybody can read it. And I'll do a video about it for my YouTube channel later so that people can understand that these are the types of things that we do. There's a grievance process that she's doing through the Writers Guild, through the collective bargaining agreement. And the reason that's important too, Reed, is Trump is union busting. He doesn't want unions. He's going after our labor forces. He doesn't want you to have the ability to fight back. And so there's a collective bargaining agreement that governs this. There's a grievance process, but it doesn't foreclose our litigation opportunities. So we're going to see how it all plays out. But I'm very proud to be able to be in the fight in this capacity. So I'll share that with all of you.
Well, good on you and good luck. As always, gang, you can also find Katie on not only here at Substack, but also on YouTube and now I guess occasionally on CNN. So way to go to be
So
back on
random.
the air. As always, gang, you can find me at the home front. If you have not yet signed up, you can hit that little button right there at the top and do that. You can also find me on the Homefront podcast, Spotify, Apple, and also on YouTube. Katie Phang, thank you so much for joining me.
My friend Reed, next time you're in Florida, let me know.
I will. Thanks, y'all, and we'll see you soon. Bye bye.
Bye, everybody.